The DC Extended Universe had everything it needed to become the most successful film franchise. They had the rights to every DC comic character, including the legendary Superman and Batman. Until the late 2000s and 10s, DC was a bigger brand than Marvel in both live action and animation. But today, its last 8 movies have been box office flops. What went so horribly wrong that they had to reboot the entire universe? Get comfortable, grab a cup of coffee and some snacks, because in this video, we're going to dive deep into what went wrong with the DCEU. This is the only video you need to understand the downfall, and hopefully, James Gunn won't repeat the same mistakes. So, without further ado, let's get started. Warner Brothers, witnessing the meteoric rise of Marvel's cinematic universe, sought to replicate its success. Marvel had methodically built a connected universe, beginning with individual character-centric films that culminated in the groundbreaking team-up, The Avengers. By the time The Avengers hit theaters, Marvel had already established a clear, audience-approved formula. Craft engaging standalone stories that gradually interweave into a larger, cohesive narrative. WB, however, attempted to fast-track this process, skipping the essential foundational steps that made the MCU resonate with fans. Their first attempt to kick off a shared universe came with the 2011 film Green Lantern, starring Ryan Reynolds. This film was a critical and commercial disaster. Both audiences and critics panned its uneven tone, weak screenplay, and lackluster direction. I don't know how this kind of low-quality visual effects was approved for a 2011 release, especially considering that audiences at the time had already seen great CGI and visual effects. The film's effects felt outdated, reminiscent of the early 90s. It was very foolish to start off with this film. So, WB decided to take their first serious step toward building their ambitious cinematic universe with Zack Snyder's Man of Steel, which was released in 2013. Zack Snyder is renowned for his distinct visual style, marked by slow-motion sequences, intense action, and a darker, brooding tone. His earlier works, such as 300 and Watchmen, established him as a filmmaker with a flair for visually striking and often serious storytelling. Warner Brothers entrusted Snyder with leading a new era of DC films, inspired by the critical and commercial success of Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy. Nolan's work had demonstrated that a darker, more grounded approach to comic book adaptations could resonate deeply with audiences. Initially, Warner Brothers offered Nolan the opportunity to spearhead this cinematic universe. However, he declined, perhaps because he wished to explore different stories. Nevertheless, Nolan remained involved as a producer, lending his expertise to the project. Unlike previous iterations, Snyder's Superman was a complex, conflicted figure. He was portrayed as a godlike being struggling to find his place in the world, burdened by the immense responsibility his powers imposed. The film's narrative followed Clark Kent's journey, from his humble upbringing in Kansas to his evolution into Earth's protector. Man of Steel, released on June 14, 2013, grossed $670 million worldwide on a budget of $225 million, but proved to be polarizing among both audiences and critics. Some praised its ambitious scope, breathtaking action sequences, and a grounded take on what it means to be a superpowered being. Others criticized its somber tone, arguing that it lacked the hopeful and inspiring essence traditionally associated with Superman. And I personally disliked the shaky camera work. One of the film's most controversial elements was the destructive battle in Metropolis, which resulted in significant civilian casualties, further divided fans. For some, this portrayal of Superman clashed with his iconic moral code, making the character feel disconnected from his classic ethos. Personally, I appreciated Snyder's take on Superman. While it diverged from the traditional depiction, I found it refreshing. After Man of Steel in 2014, they announced their release slate through 2020, which consisted of a total of 11 movies, including 2 Justice League films. The DCEU didn't get a great start like Iron Man, yet WB saw enough financial promise in the film to press forward with their larger plans for the universe. WB made a bold decision. Instead of developing individual movies to introduce their heroes as Marvel had done, they would leapfrog directly into building a shared universe. After Snyder's first film got mixed reviews, studio heads doubted his vision but went on to their second release. And when they announced their second film, the audience lost their freaking minds. Batman Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice was released in March 2016. This move was intended to fast-track the journey to a Justice League movie, bringing multiple characters into the spotlight and setting the stage for a grander, interconnected universe. Batman vs. Superman was once again directed by Zack Snyder, and it introduced Ben Affleck as an older, weary Batman who had grown cynical after years of crime-fighting in Gotham. The film also marked Gal Gadot's debut as Wonder Woman, and God, it was an iconic entry, followed by probably the best lines of the film.
She with you?
I thought she was with you.
This movie had some great scenes and action sequences. Actually, Snyder had made a slightly lengthy movie, keeping world building and characters in mind. The extended version, called the Ultimate Edition, received some good reviews, which included 30 minutes of additional story and action, scenes that explained how Batman got the kryptonite from Luthor and so on. However, due to studio pressure to reduce the runtime to 2.5 hours for more shows and to make it PG-13, Snyder had to cut 30 minutes from such a big movie, which really demanded the length. We can say commerce overpowered art here. The studio just cared about the number of shows rather than good storytelling, which definitely could have made them more money. The theatrical release of Batman v Superman carried the immense burden of world building within just 2 hours and 30 minutes. This ambition led to a cluttered and disjointed storyline. The film introduced Batman, Wonder Woman, and Lex Luthor while also giving glimpses of Aquaman, Flash, and Cyborg, all in a single damn movie. The overloaded narrative was criticized for being unfocused and overly complicated. One of the central criticisms was the weak justification for the conflict between Batman and Superman. Affleck's Batman, shaped by the destruction in Metropolis during Man of Steel, views Superman as a potential global threat. However, the film struggled to convincingly develop the emotional and psychological tension necessary for this conflict to resonate. The climactic fight between the two heroes, meant to be the emotional high point, came across as unearned and hollow. And let's not forget the infamous Martha scene, where their battle abruptly ends when they realize their mothers share the same name.
Save Martha! Why did you say that name? Why did you say that name?
It's his mother's name!
Okay.
While I understand what the scene was trying to convey, the execution felt absurd and unintentionally comedic. It became a pop culture punchline, widely mocked for its contrived resolution.
I was fighting a caped badass. Then I discovered his mom is named Martha, too.
No.
The tone of Batman v Superman was overwhelmingly dark, serious, and at times, even dull. It once again lacked the levity and fun that many audiences typically expect from superhero films. While Snyder clearly took into account the feedback from Man of Steel, perhaps that's why he inserted 3 to 4 hopeful scenes with Superman. Yet, the movie still faced criticism for sidelining him. Superman was relegated to a brooding, passive figure for much of the film, which frustrated many fans. The film earned one of the lowest critic scores for a superhero movie, with only 29% on Rotten Tomatoes, while the audience score was a slightly higher 63%. After the failure of Batman vs. Superman, Zack Snyder's perspective on comics and superheroes began circulating, shocking many DC fans with his statements, and that his take on Batman would be darker. Read this statement for yourself. His past comments on Superman led many to conclude that Snyder never truly understood or appreciated comic characters, and didn't care deeply for the source material.
I'm deep in Watchmen. I'm deep in deconstructing like superheroes. It's like, hey, do you want to make a Superman movie? It's like, well, I'm about to tear him down. Right? I'm going to kill him. I'm not interested in fixing him or making him interesting. He's the enemy right now.
Despite the mixed reception, Batman v Superman managed to gross $874 million globally. However, it still fell short of Warner Brothers' billion-dollar expectations, especially considering it featured the first-ever on-screen meeting of Batman and Superman, two of the most iconic superheroes in pop culture. The underperformance raised concerns among the studio executives, who began to question Snyder's vision for the DCEU. Initially, there was excitement about their ambitious, fast-tracked approach, but it quickly gave way to unease as they realized it wasn't delivering the expected results. Behind the scenes, WB executives were growing increasingly anxious and started to reconsider Snyder's direction for the cinematic universe. This pivotal moment marked the beginning of a shift in the DCEU's trajectory, as studio heads sought a new approach to salvage the franchise. The decision to pivot from Snyder's path would eventually lead to a more varied direction, with subsequent films opting for a lighter tone and restructuring the shared universe. However, the scars of Batman vs. Superman and its divisive reception would remain a point of reflection in the years that followed. Honestly, this failure marked the first step in the downfall of the DCEU. Immediately after BVS, Snyder began production on Justice League, which was slated for release in the second half of the following year, 2017. Their next major release, Suicide Squad, was initially slated to debut just 4 months after BVS. Directed by David Ayer, the film was envisioned as a gritty, mature exploration of a team of anti-heroes thrust into reluctant heroism. Ayer aimed to delve into the psychological complexities of a group of villains, highlighting standout characters like Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn and Will Smith's Deadshot. However, following the critical backlash to the dark and somber tone of BVS, Warner Brothers decided to make drastic changes. They mandated significant reshoots and brought in a trailer editing company to recut the film, hoping to mimic the lighthearted humor and colorful energy seen in Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy or the R-rated irreverence of Deadpool. In an interview, Ayer expressed his disappointment, saying, "The surprise success of Deadpool and the failure of BVS made the studio transform my soulful, dark movie into a comedy." He admitted to feeling heartbroken by the final studio version of his film. The end product was a movie that felt tonally inconsistent, riddled with signs of heavy studio interference. The narrative was chaotic, with scattered plot lines and minimal character development. Jared Leto's portrayal of the Joker, heavily promoted in the marketing campaign, ended up as a minor and underwhelming role, leaving audiences dissatisfied. Despite its flaws, Suicide Squad managed to gross $749 million globally, surpassing the box office performance of Man of Steel. However, its critical reception was bad, with a dismal 26% score on Rotten Tomatoes and only 58% from audiences. While financially successful, the movie further tarnished the reputation of the DC Extended Universe. Critics and fans alike viewed it as yet another example of WB's struggle to establish a clear and consistent creative vision. The Wonder Woman film had been in development since 1996. In March 2005, WB announced that Joss Whedon would write and direct the film. For some reasons, he left the project before finalizing the screenplay. Fast forward to 2015, Patty Jenkins stepped in as director, with a story crafted by Zack Snyder and others. Filming began even before the release of Dawn of Justice and Suicide Squad. Amidst the franchise's early chaos and misfires, Wonder Woman arrived in June 2017 as a much-needed beacon of hope. For me, it stands as the best superhero origin film to date. Unlike earlier entries in the DC universe, Wonder Woman struck a remarkable balance between action, humor, and romance. Its plot, screenplay, and acting were memorable, with an unforgettable background score and sound design that elevated the film even further. The story delved into Diana Prince's transformation from a sheltered Amazonian warrior on the idyllic island of Themyscira to a formidable hero during World War I. Gal Gadot's portrayal was widely acclaimed, embodying strength and compassion in equal measure. The film's empowering tone and genuine hero's journey were a refreshing contrast to the darker atmosphere of Snyder's previous DC films. It wasn't just a critical success, it became a cultural phenomenon. Made on a $150 million budget, it grossed over $822 million worldwide, earning a stellar 93% critic score and 83% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. Wonder Woman proved that the DCEU could achieve greatness when it stayed true to the core of its characters. Remarkably, about 52% of the film's audience was female, an impressive feat in a genre typically dominated by male viewers. However, even here, we saw studio interference. Many people thought the climax was off. Guess what? That was the only part where the studio forced Patty Jenkins. Originally, the climax was meant to avoid the trope of a singular villain, emphasizing instead the duality of human nature, the good and the bad in people. Jenkins expressed her dissatisfaction later in a podcast. She said, "Sometimes I'll read the reviews, and the only thing that unanimously gets some shit about was those end pyrotechnics. That like, DC always does this. And the truth was, it was them. The studio did make me do that, and it wasn't right. But that's okay." The next film on the slate, Justice League, was meant to be the culmination of Snyder's vision and the franchise's crowning achievement. The film was touted as the first on-screen big team-up of the DCEU, Zack Snyder's magnum opus featuring Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, Flash, and Cyborg. This film was their most important project, intended to prove their potential or to at least lay the foundation for a successful cinematic universe. Snyder's screenplay and storyboard felt bloated, so WB and Snyder decided not to make just 2, but 3 Justice League movies. In parts 2 and 3, they might have explored the dystopian future where Darkseid had conquered Earth and Superman had turned evil. This concept was teased in BVS and further expanded upon in the Snyder-cut. Remember, I am not mentioning the names of studio executives, in-charges, or heads, because in the DCEU's downfall, there are tons of studio executives who are responsible. So, there's no point in addressing every individual. Also, there are stories about how, just for profit, studio members pushed half-baked products. I will explain this in the next few minutes. Snyder began filming in April 2016 and wrapped in October 2016. Within the studio, many didn't want Snyder to continue this universe as his first two films received mixed responses. After BVS's failure and Wonder Woman's success, the studio began to doubt Snyder's vision. During filming, they pressured Snyder to make changes to the script, with input from a group of writers. They claimed the film would be hopeful and optimistic compared to the previous DCEU films. In May 2017, during post-production, Snyder stepped down as the director to mourn his daughter's tragic death by suicide. Or perhaps studio made him quit. We don't know for sure, as there are various accounts. After that, Joss Whedon was given the responsibility to complete the film. From here, everything went downhill. Whedon was not just asked to complete the film, the WBCEO mandated that the runtime be kept under 2 hours. And guess what the runtime was? The studio didn't care about character building or storytelling. They were focused solely on increasing the number of shows. Additionally, WB announced 2 months of extensive reshoots, costing $25 million, making it one of the most expensive films ever, with a $300 million budget. For context, the usual cost of reshoots is somewhere between $5 to $15 million. The reshoots coincided with Henry Cavill's schedule for Paramount's Mission Impossible, for which he had grown a mustache that he was contractually obligated to keep. Reportedly, it cost $3 million to digitally remove Cavill's mustache, but the result was still shit. As we all know, hooking the audience in the first 10 minutes is crucial in films. The opening scene of this $300 million movie was this. Here's an interesting fact. The company knew about the production issues and that the film's content and quality were subpar, yet they went ahead with the release rather than delaying it. Why? Before the WBATT merger, executives wanted to secure their cash bonuses. Post-merger, nobody could be certain who the new executives would be. Snyder and Whedon are polar opposites as directors, with vastly different creative visions. Snyder's style focuses on larger-than-life visuals and dark, serious storytelling. On the other hand, Whedon, with his TV background, is known for lighthearted, comedic storytelling. Both are great in their own ways, but when you take Snyder's serious, lengthy film and hand it over to Whedon to shorten, add banter, and lighten the tone, the result is a disaster. Finally, Justice League hit theaters on November 17, 2017, turned out to be both a critical and financial disappointment. Globally, it grossed just $661 million against a massive $300 million budget, making it a significant failure, as break-even point was $750 million. The critics' score stands at 39%, while the audience score is slightly better at 67%. I've never heard anyone say, "Yeah, I liked Justice League." Whedon attempted to condense Snyder's grand, complex, and serious storyline into a streamlined yet often nonsensical narrative. The subplot involving the Russian family made no sense, and character interactions were poorly handled, frequently coming across as needlessly insulting. Crucial character arcs, such as those of Flash and Victor, were heavily truncated. Key plot points were left unexplored, and the film's villain, Steppenwolf, was widely criticized for being underdeveloped and unmemorable. Whedon increased the saturation to nearly unbearable levels, making the visuals look unnatural and out of place. He also included his signature falling onto a woman's chest gag, which felt entirely inappropriate for the tone of the film. Beyond a few fleeting moments, the humor felt forced and largely unfunny. Overall, it was a disastrous outcome for a movie intended to serve as DC's answer to the Avengers. Also in July 2020, Ray Fisher, who played Cyborg, accused Whedon of gross, abusive, unprofessional, and completely unacceptable behavior on set. Fisher's claims were publicly supported by Jason Momoa. Adding to the criticism, Gal Gadot revealed that Whedon had threatened to ruin her career during the reshoots. She later stated she would never work with him again. Noticing something? The main problem here is that DC executives never had their own strong vision. After their first failure, they panicked, pivoted, and started mimicking Marvel's style of filmmaking. They tried turning a serious, gritty film like Suicide Squad into a lighthearted MCU-like movie, following the success of Guardians of the Galaxy and Deadpool. Then, after Wonder Woman's success, they distanced themselves even further from Snyder's vision. Their desperation was obvious when they brought Whedon on board to rework Justice League, the man who had directed Marvel's first 2 Avengers movies. Later, they even hired James Gunn to make DCEU projects after he delivered successful films for Marvel. Gunn truly gave them a great movie and show, which fully changed the DCEU's direction. But that's a discussion for later in this video. If you're enjoying this video so far, please hit that like button and subscribe. It would mean a lot. The failure of Justice League marked a turning point for the DCEU. Sequels featuring DC's most famous superheroes were shelved. Henry Cavill was effectively let go from the DCEU after the infamous mustache incident, and no further updates came from studio executives or directors regarding his future as Superman. However, Mission Impossible director Christopher McQuarrie was enthusiastic about directing a Man of Steel sequel with Cavill. He even pitched ideas to the studio, but Warner Brothers didn't respond, leading McQuarrie to move on. Ben Affleck, who had been set to direct, write, and star in a standalone Batman film, grew increasingly disillusioned with the role. Behind the scenes, he struggled with personal issues, including a public battle with alcoholism. The inconsistent and fleeting nature of the DCEU, combined with backlash from fans and critics, eventually pushed Affleck to step away from the character entirely. Ray Fisher, who played Cyborg, was rumored to have been blacklisted by the studio after he publicly alleged mistreatment during Whedon's Justice League reshoots. His solo movie, which was announced in the initial slate, never went into production. In February 2018, it was reported that Zack Snyder was removed from his directorial duties on Justice League after his cut was described as unwatchable, according to Collider's Matt Goldberg. As a result, there was no hope for a Justice League 2. Snyder's vision was completely abandoned, and WB began shifting away from the interconnected universe model. The studio redirected its focus to standalone films and its sequels that could thrive independently of the larger extended universe's narrative. Their next release on the slate was Aquaman, starring Jason Momoa in the titular role and directed by James Wan. Filming started in May 2017 and ended in October of the same year, even before Justice League was released. Momoa was signed for a 4-film contract, presumably 2 Aquaman films and 2 Justice League films. As usual, on July 21, 2018, the first trailer for Aquaman was shown at San Diego Comic-Con, and it was well received. However, when the studio held early test screenings the following month, it generally got mixed reactions. Aquaman was released in December 2018, embracing a vibrant, adventurous, lighthearted tone and largely ignoring the darker aesthetics of Snyder's earlier films. The movie was a visual spectacle, at least at the time, that leaned into the fantastical elements of the underwater world of Atlantis. Jason Momoa's charismatic portrayal of the titular hero resonated with audiences. However, there were some negatives. The hero's journey, involving a reluctant king reclaiming his throne, felt predictable and overused. The tone was inconsistent, with the movie struggling to balance its humor with its more serious moments. The villains were underutilized and easily forgettable. While visually impressive, the reliance on CGI could feel excessive and overwhelming. To be honest, for me, it was a one-time watch. I never imagined it would gross over $1 billion worldwide. It became the highest-grossing film in the DCEU. The film's success can largely be attributed to its marketing strategy. Along with appealing to children and male adults, Aquaman managed to attract a larger-than-usual female audience, significantly boosting its reach. Ultimately, Aquaman demonstrated that standalone films could thrive when given creative freedom outside the constraints of a shared universe. Despite receiving mixed scores from both critics and audiences, it remains the highest-grossing DCEU film to date. Similarly, the next film, Shazam, took a completely different approach, embracing a light-hearted, comedic tone reminiscent of a family adventure rather than a traditional superhero movie. Initially, in 2008, Shazam entered pre-production with Dwayne Johnson in talks to play the villain Black Adam. However, the project faced numerous changes in writers and directors over the years. By July 2016, Dwayne Johnson confirmed he would star in Shazam but was undecided about whether to portray Shazam or Black Adam. Ultimately, he chose to step away from Shazam and focus on a solo Black Adam film. This may have been because his growing brand allowed him to push for a standalone movie, reimagining Black Adam as an anti-hero rather than the villain depicted in the comics. Shazam hit theaters in April 2019, directed by David F. Sandberg, with Zachary Levi cast as the titular character. Levi's portrayal of the childlike superhero was both charming and entertaining, and the movie's emphasis on heart and humor helped it stand out in the DCEU. It was a fun, feel-good film that didn't take itself too seriously. However, it wasn't without flaws. The story lacked tension and urgency, and the plot lines were fairly predictable. Despite these shortcomings, financially, it grossed $365 million worldwide, making it the lowest-earning DCEU movie. However, due to its modest production budget of $100 million, it was still considered a financial success. Shazam earned one of the best critical receptions in the DCEU, boasting a 90% critic score and an 82% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. This was surprising to me, especially the critics' score. The mid-credit scene teased a lunchroom encounter where a person in a Superman costume shows up. However, the character's face wasn't shown, likely because Henry Cavill was either busy with other projects or had been quietly removed from the role, an uncertainty that remains unresolved. During this period, Warner Brothers ventured into standalone, character-focused films that were entirely separate from the DC extended universe. One such example was Joker, directed by Todd Phillips and starring Joaquin Phoenix. Phoenix's mesmerizing performance earned him an Academy Award for Best Actor, and the film became a global phenomenon, grossing over $1 billion at the box office, despite being rated R. Similarly, The Batman, directed by Matt Reeves and featuring Robert Pattinson in the titular role, struck a chord with audiences and achieved significant commercial and critical success. These films operated independently of the DCEU's interconnected narrative. So, back to our story. Their next film, Birds of Prey, hit theaters on February 7th, 2020. Honestly, nobody was really clamoring for this movie, not a spin-off focused on Harley Quinn at least. Instead of playing it safe with popular superhero sequels like Man of Steel 2 or Aquaman, I guess DC wanted to do something adventurous. The idea for Birds of Prey actually came from Margot Robbie herself. Back in 2015, she pitched the concept to WB, envisioning it as an R-rated girl gang film starring Harley Quinn. Robbie thought, Harley needs friends. After all, Harley thrives on chaos and interactions, so a standalone film didn't really fit her vibe. Robbie even stepped in as a producer, ensuring the project had a female director at the helm. Kathy Yan landed the job with a bold pitch about wanting to smash the patriarchy, aligning perfectly with the film's edgy tone. The movie was meant to spotlight Harley as a breakout star, but it didn't quite hit the bullseye. While Margot Robbie delivered a fantastic performance filled with quirky humor and charm, and the film's focus on female empowerment paired with its killer soundtrack stood out, it suffered from some glaring issues. The plot was messy, the tone inconsistent, and the action sequences, unfortunately, didn't leave a lasting impression. On Rotten Tomatoes, Birds of Prey earned respectable scores, 79% from critics and 78% from audiences. But its financial performance told a different story. With a modest budget of $84 million, the movie grossed just $200 million worldwide, falling $50 to $100 million short of breaking even. This underwhelming box office run added another dent to the DCEU's already shaky reputation. Then, Wonder Woman 1984 was released, once again directed by Patty Jenkins, who helmed the first film. Jenkins described it as another great love story. Filming began in June 2018 and lasted for 6 months. Originally slated for a December 2019 release, the film faced multiple delays due to the global pandemic, finally hitting theaters and HBO Max simultaneously on December 25, 2020. With the first film adored by both fans and critics, Warner Brothers had high expectations for the sequel. The trailer was well cut, promising a blockbuster experience and generating significant buzz. But when audiences watched the movie, they realized they got catfished by the trailer. While Gal Gadot delivered a charismatic performance,
Max Lord, you're putting yourself and everyone else in grave danger. I need you to give me the stone. What happened to it?
the vibrant 1980s aesthetic and music added a refreshing vibe. The film struggled with pacing issues and abrupt tonal shifts. The central plot revolved around a wish-granting dreamstone, but its mechanics and consequences felt inconsistent, leaving several unanswered questions. The romance between Steve Trevor and Diana, involving Steve's consciousness inhabiting another man's body, was awkwardly handled and raised ethical concerns. Lengthy, slow-moving scenes exhausted viewers, and the villain, Maxwell Lord, whose main goal was to accumulate more wishes, felt underwhelming. Meanwhile, the so-called apex predator Cheetah, played by Kristen Wiig, was underutilized and poorly developed. The stakes felt unusually low compared to other superhero films, making the story less engaging. Instead of elevating Diana's character, the film seemed to stall her progression. The action sequences, which were a highlight in the first film with their satisfying choreography, were comparatively fewer, And shit. The climax, both in concept and execution, fell flat, failing to deliver the emotional or cinematic punch fans expected. Overall, it pretty much killed off the legacy that the first film had built. Critics and audiences gave mixed reviews. Despite being made on a hefty budget of $200 million, the film grossed only $169 million globally, partly due to its simultaneous release on HBO Max and pandemic-related challenges. Reports suggest that the movie did not break even, incurring losses estimated between $50 million and $100 million. While it's hard to determine how the film might have performed under normal circumstances, it's clear that Wonder Woman 1984 failed to meet the high expectations set by its predecessor. Now buckle up, we're going to dive deep into Snyder's Justice League release drama, which came out after Wonder Woman 1984. Despite these ups and downs, there was still a strong group of fans who clamored to see Zack Snyder's original vision for Justice League. After the release of Man of Steel, Zack Snyder outlined his vision for the DCEU, consisting of a 5-film arc that included Man of Steel, Dawn of Justice, and a Justice League trilogy. By February 2017, Snyder began screening rough versions of Justice League, but studio executives disliked it, feeling the plot was too complex. They decided to pivot and slowly handed over control of the script, and later the direction, to Joss Whedon. Snyder made several changes to the film from the start as per the studio's requests. However, he did not directly challenge these changes, as he and his family were dealing with the tragic death of his daughter, Autumn. Eventually, he stepped down during post-production. While Snyder's rough cut was poorly received by test audiences, the early screenings of Whedon's cut surprisingly scored as high as the first Wonder Woman. This prompted Warner Bros. To proceed with Whedon's version. Later, an anonymous WB executive admitted that even though the studio didn't like the stupefying changes in Whedon's version, they were reluctant to criticize it and decided to move forward. After seeing Whedon's theatrical version in late 2017, Snyder's wife, Deborah, and executive producer Christopher Nolan advised him not to watch it, knowing it would break his heart. In February 2018, a source claimed that Snyder had been quietly fired by the studio about 3 months before the public announcement of his departure. After the theatrical release of Justice League, fans created an online petition to release the Snyder-cut, which gained more than 100,000 signatures. The movement, which used the hashtag #ReleaseTheSnyder-cut on social media, began even before fans knew that Snyder's cut of Justice League actually existed. It gained traction following the theatrical version's mixed reviews, as fans particularly disliked the film and assumed Whedon had created an inferior version. On the second anniversary of the theatrical release of Justice League, the cast, including Ben Affleck, Gal Gadot, Jason Momoa, and other crew members, voiced their support on social media for releasing the Snyder Cut. Fans went to extreme lengths to amplify their demand, fueled further by Snyder himself, who shared behind-the-scenes pictures on social media to motivate them. Following the tragic death of Snyder's daughter and his departure from the film, the Snyder Cut movement began raising awareness and funds for suicide prevention. Their efforts raised over $500,000 for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. The campaign gained significant visibility, with fans purchasing ad space on 2 billboards in Times Square during the 2019 New York Comic-Con. These billboards even featured quotes from cast and crew members advocating for Snyder's vision. At its peak, Release the Snyder Cut trended with over 1 million tweets in a single day. However, according to Rolling Stone, Warner Media's internal investigation found that about 13% of the accounts participating in the campaign were fake. The publication also reported that Snyder may have subtly manipulated the movement, citing interviews with over 20 individuals involved in both versions of the film. Throughout the campaign, the fandom split into 2 camps. One group genuinely supported Snyder's vision and hoped to see his trilogy completed. The other group, however, became infamous for toxic behavior, resorting to harassment, threats, and cyberbullying anyone who criticized the movement. Initially, WB was hesitant to release the Snyder Cut. They approached Snyder with the idea of releasing his unfinished version, but he rejected the offer, insisting that it had to be a fully completed film or nothing at all. In February 2020, WB finally agreed to let Snyder complete his vision. On May 20th, 2020, during a Q&A after an online watch party of Man of Steel with Henry Cavill, Snyder officially announced that his cut of Justice League would be released as Zack Snyder's Justice League on HBO Max in 2021. Interestingly, there was a bizarre hiccup before its official release. When viewers attempted to stream Tom and Jerry on HBO Max, Snyder's Justice League accidentally played instead, leading to an early leak. The film's 4-hour cut restored Snyder's original footage, expanding on character backstories, plot lines, and the overarching mythology that had been stripped away in Whedon's version. Snyder filmed approximately 4 to 5 minutes of additional footage, which appears at the end of the movie in a dystopian future sequence, including the introduction of Martian Manhunter. The reshoots, along with finishing the visual effects, scoring, and editing, added an extra $70 million to the production costs. Finally, Zack Snyder's Justice League was released on March 18, 2021, on HBO Max. The film received widespread praise, particularly when compared to the theatrical version. Its world-building was presented on an epic scale. Character introductions and development were more fleshed out, and the visuals were simply spectacular. Since the film was released directly on a streaming platform, we can't assess its financial success the way we would for a theatrical release. Moreover, OTT platforms rarely disclose detailed viewership data, and even when they do, verifying it is difficult. As a result, we have to rely on ratings to gauge its impact. To date, Zack Snyder's Justice League holds the highest audience rating for any DCEU project, sitting at an impressive 92%. Critics also gave it a respectable score of 71%, signaling that content-wise, the movie was a hit. While the Snyder-cut was well received by fans and offered a sense of closure, it did little to change the franchise's trajectory. By this point, the damage had been done, and the DCEU's potential as a cohesive shared universe was irreparably compromised. After some fans deemed #Release the Snyder Cut movement a success, they shifted their focus to demanding Snyder's full trilogy. They launched the #Restore the Snyderverse, hoping to pressure Warner Brothers into continuing Snyder's vision. However, this movement didn't gain as much traction. Some fans believed they had the power to influence the studio, but the reality was more complex. WB had a different motivation for releasing the Snyder Cut. The studio was preparing to launch their streaming platform, and the timing coincided with the peak of the pandemic when strict filming restrictions were in place. Since fans were already clamoring for the Snyder Cut, and extensive filming wasn't necessary, just post-production, WB saw an opportunity. Releasing the Snyder Cut was a strategic decision to leverage existing demand while minimizing new production costs. The next big release was the Suicide Squad. After the first Suicide Squad became a financial success despite harsh reviews, Warner Brothers quickly began planning its sequel. Initially, David Ayer, the director of the original film, was in talks to helm the project. However, over time, several directors and writers came and went, leaving the sequel in a state of uncertainty. In October 2018, James Gunn was hired to write and potentially direct the film. WB had been eager to bring Gunn into the DCEU right after his controversial dismissal by Disney, following the resurfacing of his old offensive tweets on sensitive topics. Interestingly, WB initially pitched Gunn the idea of making a Superman movie. However, Gunn wasn't sure if Superman was the right fit for him, so WB gave him free rein to choose any DC property he wanted. He ultimately chose the Suicide Squad, diving deep into DC's comic library to handpick a roster of characters that would create an exciting and dynamic team. Gunn insisted on an R rating for the film, despite WB wanting to aim for a PG-13 rating. In the end, the studio trusted Gunn enough to let him have his way, believing his vision was worth the risk. The Suicide Squad was described as a relaunch of the franchise rather than a direct sequel, standalone story, spin-off, or reboot. It featured a mostly new cast, fresh ideas, and a bold direction. Gunn's unique approach paid off in creating a film filled with heart, twists, and an unpredictable narrative that defied typical comic book movie tropes. If you haven't seen this movie yet, I highly recommend it. Gunn absolutely nailed it. You'll find yourself rooting for every character, no matter how quirky or flawed they are. The twists, emotional depth, and thrilling action make this a must-watch and one of the best DC movies ever made. It was released simultaneously in theaters and on HBO Max on August 5, 2021. The film was very well received by both critics and audiences. However, despite being a great movie, its marketing was terrible. The title, The Suicide Squad, led many to think it was just another sequel to the poorly received first film, causing them to ignore it. It was also a technical box office flop, as it was streaming on HBO Max and became available on pirated sites in high quality just hours after its release. It grossed only $163 million worldwide. Despite this, it remains one of the best-rated DCEU films to date, with an audience score of 82% and an impressive critic score of 90%. Following James Gunn's success with The Suicide Squad, the spin-off series Peacemaker, starring John Cena, premiered on HBO Max on January 13th. This series expertly blends dark humor, explosive action, and emotional storytelling, offering a deeper exploration of a flawed anti-hero's journey toward redemption. Gunn's direction, combined with a stellar cast and a killer soundtrack, elevates the complex characters and sharp dialogue, making Peacemaker one of DC's most compelling offerings. Though it initially struggled with modest viewership, partly because Peacemaker was a lesser-known DC character and HBO Max wasn't as widely popular, the series gradually gained traction through positive word of mouth. It quickly became one of the best-rated DCEU products, earning impressive scores of 93% from critics and 89% from audiences. The show's success led to HBO Max announcing a second season in February 2022, with Gunn set to write and direct all episodes, promising even more of the irreverent, emotionally charged storytelling that won fans over. As I told you earlier, Dwayne Johnson had been connected to the role of Black Adam for over a decade, showing his dedication to the character. In January 2017, Johnson and the studio head decided to split Shazam and Black Adam into two standalone films. The reasoning was clear. Johnson's stature as an actor made it unsuitable for him to play a mere side character or villain. Moreover, interviews suggest Johnson was more interested in facing iconic heroes like Superman or Batman, rather than his comic-accurate rival Shazam. This sentiment even led to Black Adam and Shazam existing in separate narratives, with Johnson openly stating that Shazam would not appear in his movie. Zachary Levi, the actor behind Shazam, later shared his dissatisfaction about this decision online. Black Adam didn't appear in the two Shazam films, and The Rock said Shazam wouldn't appear in Black Adam. Instead, the Justice Society of America would be introduced. Due to the pandemic, the film's production was delayed multiple times. Johnson originally pitched the idea for Cavill's return as Superman to DC Films president Walter Hamada, who rejected it due to plans for other Superman projects. During filming, the mid-credits scene featuring Superman was initially shot with a body double, without showing the actor's face. This scene received a positive response during early test screenings, prompting a renewed push to include Cavill. After Hamada rejected Cavill's return, Johnson approached the co-chairman of WB Motion Picture Group, who approved it. Henry Cavill was then asked to announce his return on social media, which he gladly did by filming himself.
Hey everyone, I wanted to wait until the weekend was over before posting this, because I wanted to give you all a chance to watch Black Adam. But now that plenty of you have, I wanted to make it official that I am back as Superman. And the image you see on this post and what you saw in Black Adam are just a very small taste of things to come. So there's a lot to be thankful for, and I'll get to that in time. But I want to thank you guys most of all. Thank you for your support, and thank you for your patience. I promise it will be rewarded.
Fans were thrilled, as this marked Cavill's first time donning the Superman cape since 2017's Justice League. However, some Snyder fans were upset, as this version of Superman came from Whedon's continuity, not Snyder's. The road to release wasn't smooth for Black Adam. Initially, the film received an R rating due to its graphic death scenes, which led to numerous cuts to achieve a PG-13 rating. The Rock really tried to take over the DCEU, claiming that Black Adam would serve as the first film in Phase 1 of a new storytelling initiative in the DCEU. Finally, it hit theaters on October 21st, 2022. Despite its grand promises, Black Adam struggled to deliver. The film dazzles with intense action and Dwayne Johnson's presence, but its flaws overshadow its strengths. The predictable plot lacks originality, the pacing feels uneven, and side characters, including the Justice Society, remain underdeveloped. Despite its grand treatment, the film misses the emotional depth and narrative weight to truly resonate. Its budget ballooned to $260 million after initially being set at $190 million. The film failed to break even at the box office, grossing just $393 million worldwide, with reports stating that its break-even point was $600 million. Unfortunately, it also didn't get a release in China, which could have added another $100 million to its box office. Johnson, with his star power and high claims of changing the future of the DCEU, tried to defend the film's performance on Twitter by comparing it to Chris Evans's first Captain America movie, which I find ridiculous. The film received harsh reviews from critics on Rotten Tomatoes, scoring just 39%. Surprisingly, the audience score was 88%, though I've never seen anyone online say, "Yeah, I fucking loved it." Its audience rating is higher than that of good DCEU films like Wonder Woman and The Suicide Squad, which I find fishy. After the disastrous failure of Black Adam and the already declining reputation of the DCEU, Henry Cavill delivered heartbreaking news to fans on social media. He won't be returning as Superman, and the reason was James Gunn. Now, the way I phrased that last sentence might have sounded more like James Gunn fired Henry Cavill, or that he's the real culprit behind DCEU's collapse. But the truth isn't that complicated. Let me explain. In April 2022, Discovery Inc. and Warner Media merged to become Warner Bros. Discovery, led by President and CEO David Zaslav. The new company was expected to restructure DC Entertainment, and Zaslav began searching for someone to fill the role equivalent of Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige to lead the new subsidiary. Gunn and Safran were announced as the co-chairs and co-CEOs of the newly formed DC Studios at the end of October 2022, and they were set to take over from Hamada on November 1st. Gunn and Safran were given supervision over all DC Comics-based media, including film, television, animation, and video games. Gunn was expected to focus on the creative side of the company, while Safran would handle the business and production side. Their deal was reportedly for 4 years. I think this was the best decision, because a cinematic universe should be run by the amazing combination of a studio's solid plan and support, plus the director's unique vision, not by some actor's intervention and claims. A week after starting their new roles, the pair began working with a group of writers to develop an 8 to 10-year plan for a new DC universe, DCU, that would be a soft reboot of the DCEU. They mentioned that some cast members from the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker would return in the DCU, and a rough memory of those events would remain. Gunn and Safran also had discussions with Henry Cavill and Ben Affleck about returning to the DCU. Cavill to portray a new character, and Affleck to direct a project. On January 31st, James Gunn released a video outlining his vision for the DC Universe's future. He announced that the first chapter of the DCU would be titled Gods and Monsters, unveiling a slate of upcoming films, TV shows, and animations designed to build a cohesive and interconnected world from the ground up. Johnson confirmed that a Black Adam sequel was not part of Gunn's immediate plans, but mentioned that he and WB would continue exploring ways to integrate Black Adam into future DC multiverse projects. Gunn responded by expressing interest in future collaborations with Johnson and Seven Bucks Productions. In August 2023, Johnson suggested the lack of a sequel was due to leadership changes at WBD.
So many changes in leadership, and as you know, anytime you have a company, but especially that size and magnitude, that's a publicly traded company, those changes in leadership, you have people coming in who creatively, fiscally are going to make decisions that you may not agree with philosophically. So I think Black Adam was one of those movies that got caught in that web. You know, that will always be one of the biggest mysteries, I think, not only for me and us on our end, but also throughout our business.
Under Gunn and Safran, the new DCU is set to launch with the release of Superman in 2025. However, the story of the DC Extended Universe wasn't entirely over. WB continued to grapple with behind-the-scenes challenges, as several movies were already in production or post-production and still needed to be released. In August 2022, following the merger, WBD's president and CEO, David Zaslav, made the decision to cancel the release of Batgirl, starring Leslie Grace. According to some reports, early test screenings had received negative feedback, with some audiences criticizing the film for looking cheap compared to other DC productions. However, The Hollywood Reporter and Deadline Hollywood suggested that the cancellation was more about the studio's larger cost-cutting strategy. The film's budget had ballooned from $70 million to $90 million, and WBD wanted DC films to be theatrical blockbusters. Regardless of the reasoning, the decision was a devastating blow for the directors, who described it as the biggest disappointment of their careers. The most disheartening part? After working on the film for 2 to 3 years, they learned about its cancellation from a report in the New York Post. It's a stark reminder of the challenges filmmakers face in an industry driven by corporate decisions. After several delays, the next DCEU film, Shazam! Fury of the Gods, finally hit theaters on March 17, 2023. Directed once again by David F. Sandberg, the film featured the return of the major cast from the first movie, along with a few new characters. Development for the sequel began shortly after the first film's release in April 2019. Shazam 2 delves into Billy Batson's internal struggle with responsibility as he faces the weight of his role as a hero. When the Daughters of Atlas unleash a powerful new threat, Billy and his foster siblings must confront their deepest fears and insecurities. The film explores themes of family, sacrifice, and embracing one's destiny. However, The DCEU's declining reputation and the announcement of the new DCU likely contributed to a lukewarm box office reception. Personally, I found it just as enjoyable as the first film, if not more so. It was lighthearted, fun, and definitely worth a one-time watch. Despite this, the film struggled at the box office. With a production budget of $120 million, it grossed only $134 million worldwide, making it a financial disappointment. On Rotten Tomatoes, the critical score is a harsh 49%, though the audience score is much more favorable at 85%. One of the standout moments in Shazam 2 was the return of Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman, which added a great touch to the film. Sandberg had also initially planned for cameos by Henry Cavill's Superman and Ben Affleck's Batman. The scene would have shown Superman attempting, and failing, to break through a dome, while Batman simply stands by and watches. The idea itself sounds fun and cool, but unfortunately, it didn't happen. In January 2023, DC Films co-CEOs Gunn and Safran said there was potential for Levi to reprise his role in the new franchise, the DCU, but a decision on the character had not been made. Sandberg said the next month that he had been told his films did not contradict Gunn and Safran's plans, and that the character's potential return would depend on the film's reception. Following the film's disappointing box office performance, Levi cast doubt on his return. Then, the highly anticipated film The Flash, starring Ezra Miller, finally hit theaters after years of delays. The project had been stuck in development hell for nearly a decade, with numerous directors joining and leaving due to creative differences. Originally planned for release shortly after Justice League Part 1, the film faced repeated delays. Finally, its pre-production began in January 2020, but then, you know what happened. Lockdown. This film was particularly significant because it was envisioned as a cornerstone for resetting the DCEU and laying the groundwork for the new DCU. It aimed to explore the multiverse concept, drawing heavily from the iconic Flashpoint comic storyline. This narrative approach opened the door to reboots, alternate realities, and a refreshed continuity for the franchise. However, production encountered numerous hurdles, including persistent delays and controversies surrounding Ezra Miller. The actor's off-screen behavior, which included multiple arrests and allegations of misconduct, cast a shadow over the project and complicated its release plans. Despite these challenges, WB saw The Flash as a crucial opportunity to pivot the DCEU's narrative direction. To build excitement, promotional materials emphasized the return of Michael Keaton as Batman, a nostalgic treat for fans. Additionally, Sasha Calle's debut as Supergirl was highlighted in trailers, promising a fresh take on the character. The film's multiverse concept intrigued fans, setting high expectations for a blockbuster experience. Finally, on June 16, 2023, The Flash arrived in theaters. The film delivered heartfelt storytelling, delving into Barry Allen's grief and the far-reaching consequences of tampering with timelines. Michael Keaton's return as Batman, alongside Sasha Calle's Supergirl and the interplay between two versions of Barry Allen, brought dynamic action sequences that captivated audiences. Ignoring Miller's behaviors and crimes, I think he really delivered a great performance as Barry Allen, showing a lot of emotional depth and energy. However, the film had its flaws. Uneven and poorly executed CGI in several scenes, a crowded narrative, and missed opportunities left the film ambitious but polarizing. The Flash received a 63% fresh critic score on Rotten Tomatoes, while the audience score stood at 82%, which isn't bad. However, it bombed at the box office, earning only $271 million against a $200 million budget. Gunn confirmed that The Flash would reset the continuity of the DCEU and, along with Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, serve as a lead-in to the DCU's first film, Superman. However, The Flash's poor box office performance raised doubts about the possibility of a sequel, with many commentators suggesting it was unlikely. In October 2023, Variety reported that no actors from Zack Snyder's DCEU films, including Ezra Miller, would reprise their roles in the DCU. Following The Flash, Blue Beetle hit theaters on August 18, 2023. Originally intended for an HBO Max release, the film was ultimately given a theatrical debut after the studio believed it was strong enough for the big screen. Blue Beetle follows Jaime Reyes, a teenager who stumbles upon a mysterious alien beetle that attaches itself to his spine, giving him a powerful exosuit. As Jaime learns to control the suit's abilities, he must face formidable enemies to protect his family and uncover the beetle's hidden secrets. Surprisingly, the movie received positive reviews, with a 77% critic score and an impressive 91% audience score. Blue Beetle became the second DCEU film to surpass 90% audience approval after Zack Snyder's Justice League. No matter how good or bad the film was, it became the lowest-earning DCEU movie to date. This is largely because audiences weren't ready to give a chance to a lesser-known character in an already struggling film universe. With a budget of $110 million, it only managed to earn $130 million globally. Looking ahead, James Gunn and Peter Safran confirmed that Solo Maridueña will reprise his role as Blue Beetle in the new DCU. Additionally, in June 2024, DC Studios and Warner Bros. Animation announced they were developing an animated television series centered around Blue Beetle for the DCU, signaling the character's continued presence in the franchise. The final DCEU film to release was Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, hitting theaters on December 22, 2023. In this sequel, Arthur Curry, now King of Atlantis, teams up with his half-brother Orm to stop Black Manta's vengeful quest, using the cursed Black Trident to prevent global destruction and protect his family. While the first Aquaman film wasn't perfect, it still became the highest-grossing DCEU movie, earning a remarkable $1.1 billion. This sequel, however, was inferior in terms of plot, direction, and execution. Still, Momoa's charismatic performance and the stunning visuals were impressive. However, the film failed to resonate with audiences and didn't even gross half of its predecessor's earnings. Like many other films, Aquaman's sequel faced multiple delays due to the pandemic. Several reshoots took place between July 2022 and June 2023 to adjust the storyline, and some roles were reduced, most notably Amber Heard's. Her involvement became a point of controversy due to the ongoing Johnny Depp and Amber Heard defamation trial. In the end, Heard appeared in the film for only about 20 minutes. With a budget of $210 million, the film earned $439 million worldwide, but it was met with harsh criticism, receiving a dismal 33% score from critics on Rotten Tomatoes, while audiences gave it a more favorable 80%. As for Jason Momoa and Aquaman's future, in December 2022, The Hollywood Reporter revealed that WB was considering ending the Aquaman film series and recasting Momoa as the character Lobo after Aquaman 2. By January 2023, Momoa confirmed he would always be Aquaman, but also expressed interest in playing other roles. In December 2024, it was officially confirmed that Momoa would portray Lobo in the DCU, starting with Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, slated for release in 2026. One of the major mistakes of the DCEU was failing to strike while the iron was hot. Instead of capitalizing on the momentum of their successful films by quickly releasing sequels, they waited too long. For example, it took 3.5 years for the Wonder Woman sequel to hit theaters, and a whopping 5 years for Aquaman to return. In an era where superhero content is bombarding audiences every few months, these delays resulted in a loss of interest and enthusiasm, making it harder for the sequels to capture the same level of excitement. By 2024, the DC Extended Universe, as originally conceived, was effectively winding down. With the studio's attention now focused on rebuilding its superhero brand under new leadership, the lingering films from the previous era were seen as the last echoes of a bold but troubled experiment. The DCEU's legacy is marked by creative conflict, corporate mismanagement, and missed opportunities. It stands as a cautionary tale of what happens when a franchise prioritizes speed over substance and spectacle over storytelling. The failures of this universe offer a valuable lesson in superhero storytelling. A successful shared universe requires patience, a clear vision, and a deep understanding of the beloved characters that fans have cherished for generations. As we move into the next chapter, let's see what the new DCU has to offer and how it will reshape the superhero landscape for the future. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.